Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we connect people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed. I'm Jeff Pallay, and thanks for being with us. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on interstate compacts, a little known but powerful agreement that allows states to work together on everything from transportation and healthcare to environmental policy and elections. These deals can cut through red tape, create uniform laws across state lines, and allow states to collaborate with the constraints that can sometimes result from a more federal approach to specific issues. According to the Council of State Governments, each state was involved in an average of 25 compacts as of 2016. But these interstate compacts are not always smooth sailing. Some compacts can lead to legal battles, political fights, or major shifts in how policies are enforced. But what are interstate compacts? You might be wondering that. So let's just get right into it. I'm joined now by Joana Da Silva-Gonzalez, who's the manager of policy initiatives at West Virginia University's NE Center, to help us break down how these interstate compacts work and take a closer look at state legislatures that are working toward developing new compacts in this year's 2025 state legislative sessions. Joanna, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, expand a little on my introduction. If you're trying to explain interstate compacts to a student at West Virginia University, hearing about it for the first time, how would you frame it and describe them?
There's two ways to frame it, right? It is an agreement between states that aim to address common issues and promote a shared agenda, which, if you're talking about in the healthcare side, it would be to have more access to healthcare, which I think I grew up in New York City. So to me, it was kind of a foreign concept that there are people in this country who live in such a non populated area that there is no doctor where they live. So it is aimed really for more access and also more work for whoever, is seeking the occupational compact. So think of it as you are someone who your profession requires you to have an occupational license, right? Let's say I am a physician and I live in a state that is part of a compact. So for example, let's say I live in Colorado. Colorado is part of this special club, this special group that will allow me to move to a state that is also part of said compact, and my license will transfer over. So I don't have to apply for a new license. It reduces the barrier of me being able to work there. So, for example, we had a paper from our director of healthcare and our director of frontiers regulations on medical licensure compacts. So, meaning doctors or physicians. In the study, it found that with the compact, it led to physicians and providers willingly going to rural areas to provide healthcare part-time that does not have a population that would then support a full-time physician to be there. So, for example, for anyone who watches Virgin River on Netflix, like why are these small town doctor shows kind of so popular is because you have one doctor for an entire town that does everything. He's an obstetrician, he's a gynecologist, he's a pediatrician, he's everything, right? Exactly. So here, not every town is as lucky to have one of those, right? Because you leave, right? The reality is we see this in a lot of states, specifically in Hawaii, that they leave to go to med school, see a whole other world, and they don't want to go back to maybe the small town they came from. So that people leave and don't come back.
Right, the old town doctor concept, right?
So then the compact specifically for medicine, right? For physicians, it allows them to be able to kind of migrate, even if it's on a part-time basis, to another state to be able to provide healthcare for less populated areas and rural areas,
Okay.
even if it's once a week.
So how does a compact play a part in that process? What's the compact helping do in that situation?
Yes, so you would not have to apply for a new license, but it has to be a state that is within that compact. So it has to be a state within that group or that club.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so for instance, if you're a physician in South Carolina and you want to go work in North Carolina, historically you would need to go get a license in North Carolina, and that's paperwork process and everything else. In states that have joined compacts, it allows for essentially use of the existing license. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yes.
So this is essentially this medical compact that you're describing is one of the ways in which compacts work. They're essentially they're multi-state agreements on I think one of the most famous examples that I can remember, which you'll understand as well, as you said you're from New York City, is the Port Authority, right? That is an interstate compact, if I'm understanding correctly, and it might be one of the more famous interstate compacts. How does that work as an interstate compact? What is that?
In New York City, you have various trains that leave the city to take you to New Jersey, to Connecticut. So, in order for you to drive a train, right, be a conductor of a train, you need to have a certain license or, training to do so. And this compact allowed these conductors to go from New York City out of New York City to be able to conduct, you know, to drive the train and still be covered and being able to do their job as they're leaving New York City into different states.
Yeah, so compacts are really interesting because they end up with governing boards that cross over between states. So, for instance, with New York and New Jersey, both state governors appoint members of a board that oversees the Port Authority. So they kind of both have a stake in the situation. So what you're seeing, we've had compacts forever. They've been part of the United States political system since the beginning, but they're taking on a new form in recent years, particularly, what you're seeing and what your area of focus is in medical areas and occupational licensing. So what are some of the states that you're seeing that are focusing on trying to pursue compacts in those areas?
So we need to remember that compacts are also occupation specific. So, for example, we're seeing a lot. The most popular one I'm seeing this year is a social work compact. The states there's Indiana, Massachusetts, Maryland, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Carolina, California, Florida, and New Mexico all have current legislation to join the social work compact. Social work is a big one. There's a push for teachers as well. We did a paper for specifically military spouses who are teachers and how these compacts can help them when they move and what regulations are there to help them in a move and the barriers that are there because you can have a lot of these, ways to reduce barriers for the person to be able to work when they move. But if it's outside of that compact, if you're going to go the compact way, then it's really difficult for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, so what's an example of the social worker compact? The way that would work, if I'm understanding it right, is if you're a social worker in one state, you want to move to another state, does it mean you don't have to retake licensing requirements and your prior licensure requirements will play out, or does it mean something else?
So it kind of transfers over, right? So it's if you're in this compact, you need to do, it's usually sometimes there's like a 7-day period to do like background checks and things like that to make sure like all the bases are covered, but you don't have to start from scratch. Especially because different states for a lot of occupations require different things for a licensure. So this way, that is not another barrier that you are finding because you're not having to maybe redo more hours or having to retake a test or having to, sometimes wait 6 months, right? And especially when you're moving, you have enough expenses as it is. You want to get to work, right? The access to that person to be able to work, but it's also access to the community to have said services.
Right. So compacts, what's the very simplistic explanation of how do states sign on to a compact? Is it literally just a bill introduced by the legislature and the governor signs it?
Yes.
Or does the governor not have to sign it? Or is it any different than a standard bill?
So it is just a regular bill
Mhm.
that is saying we are now part of this compact. It has a bill number. Once it turns into law, it is a law that we are now part of this compact.
Got it. So, and they have to, I would imagine, introduce the same wording of the existing compact. They can't like tweak or change it, of course, without creating an entirely new compact.
Well, there's wording in there that'll speak to it, right? So, for example, there is one in Arkansas for a medical licensure compact, right? So it gives the reasoning of, in order to strengthen access to healthcare and in recognitions of the advances in delivery of healthcare, the member states of the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact have allied in a common purpose to develop a comprehensive process, right? Of existing licensing, and it gives authority to the state board. The bill goes on to say that the compact also adopts the prevailing standards for licensure and affirms that the practice of medicine occurs where the patient is located at the time of the physician patient encounter. Right. So if you're going from Colorado to Wyoming, you are then using your Wyoming license when you are making that first physician patient encounter. That is very specific wording specific to things in healthcare, because that is kind of what the physician patient encounter, the physician patient relationship is kind of what governs everything that kind of goes on and what you're able to do from there.
Okay, so let's explore another type of compact that has to do with, say, background checks. So how does that work when there's a compact that relates to background checks over certain positions?
So when you are in a compact, let's say I am a massage therapist and I'm going from Alabama to Arkansas, which are currently two states who have legislation for massage therapy licensure. And, it's usually a couple of days for the board to overlook to see if my license is in good standing. And then certain professions, there's a background check. So if it was something outside of a compact and not a compact, then there would be a lot more of an extensive background search if anyone could just go to any state. So since I'm in that compact, they have my license from Alabama if I'm moving to Arkansas, and they can see if there's any maldoing in said state, or if I, was delicensed, or if anything happened, right? I cannot run away from my license, and I can't have had anything wrong in one place that they can't see in the next one due
Okay.
to the compact.
Yeah, so it almost reminds me of, I'm sure for any of our listeners that you've probably experienced this in some way as a consumer. If you ever switch medical practices, your doctor is required to send your medical records to your new doctor. And it's almost like, if I understand this correctly, the compacts to some degree allow that same kind of data and information exchange in professions or in industries to facilitate awareness of a history. If that makes some sense.
Well, yes, but it's more on like you being able to work, because I'm only say on specifically the medical side, right? And on your records. If you're a patient, you're signing, I need my records, I'm taking it, you can do that. And I only say that because as a military spouse, we have to do that. There's an entire medical process we have to go to when moving states, when moving stations, and moving countries. So as a consumer, right, it's up to you. But when we see a lot of kind of what you're talking about is psychologists, right? Because psychologists have to be licensed in that state
Hmm.
to be able to see you, even if it's telemedicine or like telehealth, or a Zoom
Yeah.
therapy session. So there are actually now states that are coming up with psychology interjurisdictional compact.
What do you find that legislators say about compacts? Do they like them? Do they dislike them? Do they not know what they are? Or what's the sort of general observation you have?
I think they like it for the simple fact that they're still bored overlooking what is happening, and it's easier for, it depends on what the purpose of the compact is. Is it for more access to whatever that is? Is it for migration purposes? Are you trying to get more people to move to your state? I think COVID and all the movement of COVID and really opened up the doors for a lot of this, because people saw, the migration, the movement to other places. People really want to leave big cities and go elsewhere because they could telework or lost their jobs, so they're trying to find it somewhere else. So an array of reasons. But compacts still give you some sort of control and a board overlooking, and it helps you catch maybe any malfeasance and helps you, because the person is still licensed and it's easier for them. So then it's easier for the person who is, if it is moving, or it is easier for access to, to the service, like with the medical licensure, compact. It helped people, doctors from Colorado go to Wyoming once a week where there wasn't a doctor, right? So
So you're saying that you've seen more of these compacts since COVID? Is this sort of they're kind of coming into the legislative fold more? Okay. Have you noticed, does one party seem to be more interested in using them as a legislative tool, or is it kind of evenly split? Depends on the state.
this depends on the state. I think we're lucky at the D Center that none of our topics are very controversial. So we're able to work and talk to everyone. And we've seen Democrats, we've seen Republicans, you know, I think more from my experience, it's more of the background and the interests of the legislator more so than it is
Mm,
the compact. So, for example, like we have legislators who were nurses, right? So they have an interest in doing things for nurses, or, there are a lot of legislators that are physicians. So they tend to introduce legislation that have to do with those topics because they have, experience in them and an expertise in them, so to speak.
right. Yeah. So that's a great way to sort of tie all this up. Is that the compacts can be a whole wide assortment of issues. There's the enhanced nursing licensure compact, which basically just allows for registered nurses and licensed practical vocational nurses to have one license and then practice across any state that's part of the compact. And then you have compacts that are as simple as in 1785, Maryland and Virginia, via an interstate compact, agreed upon what their border would be. That was done via compact. So it has a wide assortment of ways that compacts can be enacted. And we're certainly seeing a lot of interesting and new ways that they're being used in legislative sessions this year. Appreciate you coming on the show today, Joanna, to tell us all about it. And we'll have to have you back on to find out what kind of compacts were passed later on in the rest of the sessions.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And for our listeners, you can learn more about interstate compacts via the link in our show notes. We'll be back next week with another episode. Make sure you subscribe to On the Ballot wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Jeff Pellett, and thanks for listening.